individuals who are genuinely repentant of their behavior. And
Sure.
I want to live in a world where I can be forgiven. And unfortunately, like I was going back to, we don't generally, I mean, even now, it's like better just to not exist on social media, because by God, if you make one mistake, people want to destroy your whole life for it.
Right.
And it's tiring. It's a tiring world to live in. And it's the world that people who are formerly incarcerated live in every day.
Hello. Hey, Jonathan Kleck back with, you know what? I stole that from Michael Smerconish. That's totally an unoriginal. If you follow Michael Smerconish, he always starts with hello. And I'm unoriginal enough apparently to just copy what he does. So thanks, Michael, for giving me something to work with. Anyway, Jonathan Kleck back with another episode of the Green Castle podcast. You know, we are a military-based company. All of our folks that work in the company are veterans. So we're often veteran-focused on the podcast. But today we went a little bit of a different direction, because not only are we veteran-focused, but we really like to tell stories about people who are doing something cool in the world. Today we have on somebody who's not a veteran. He actually comes from a family of veterans, but he's doing some really cool stuff. A guy named Ricky Staub with Neighborhood Film Company. You may not know Ricky, but you know his work. He's got a feature film coming out, Concrete Cowboy, starring Idris Elba. But all that aside, so that's pretty cool that Ricky's doing big things in Hollywood. He's a Philly kid going on to do big things. But what we're most excited about was Ricky has a really cool philanthropic effort, something that's really unique that I haven't seen really anybody else doing. We had a chance to talk to him about what he's doing with formerly incarcerated individuals and how he's helping to give them a renewed opportunity in life. This is a really cool story. It's really cool about how he came to be inspired to do this, and what he's done, and the lives that he's impacted, and what those individuals have gone on to do, and that trickle down, that butterfly effect of how they've gone on to benefit folks in the world. Very cool story. Gives you a cool opportunity to think about what you might want to do and to help other people get a leg up. Anyway, stay tuned. Thanks, Ricky, for joining us. You guys are going to enjoy this one.
This individuality stuff is a bunch of crap.
There's a reason why.
A master of innovation.
The key to this growing is you.
Any rational person would give up.
I can't disagree with that.
Make sure that we're not prisoners of our own experiences.
You need a team of great people.
Will not tolerate a loser.
What they need is a common vision.
Helping organizations win one veteran at a time. This is the Green Castle Podcast.
Hey, Ricky, thanks for joining us today, man. Appreciate your time. I mentioned to you earlier that I've been following your story. I think it's a fascinating story, just about the lengths that you went to pursue your passion. I read a bunch of articles and I've seen some posts. Mostly what I want to talk about. One, obviously, you've done some really big things in the film industry, but my fascination is with the purpose and the mission behind Neighborhood Film Company, and how you've taken a leap with, for a guy who's never really dealt with former inmates or those who were formerly incarcerated, the lengths that you went to really embrace that mission to help those who were formerly incarcerated. I want to kind of just dig into that if we can a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Where should we start?
Yeah, right. So I read a couple articles in it, and it said that you had finished filming The Last Airbender, working with M. Night Shyamalan here in Philly, and at some point you got exposed to those who were homeless. You were in a park, or I know there's a bunch of things that sort of happened simultaneously, right? You met up with one of the nuns from Project Home. Just kind of take us back to the beginning, man. I'm so fascinated by this.
Yeah, so that I should probably know the year offhand, but I don't. But I was, in my mid-20s. I was working for producer Sam Mercer, who had done a lot of night films. So that's what actually brought me to Philadelphia from LA. But yeah, at the time it was kind of a combination of things. I loved my job. I was doing what I'd always dreamed. Sam was a hard boss, but a great boss. A lot of what I am today is because of him. And I've obviously stayed close with him. You know, he was a producer on my first movie, which is a dream in and of itself. But yeah, at the time, you know, to be totally frank and honest, I was wrestling with a lot of like very easy questions. You know, why am I alive? Is there a God? What happens when you die? You know, simple 25-year-old questions.
Yeah.
Or
midlife questions that hit you at 25.
More midlife. I just advanced it, you know, before I had already been married and kids and a house. Just figured I'd tackle it early, you know, get it out of the way. But I genuinely like started to ask myself those questions. And it really led me down a path of interrogating, like, what do I believe about, is there a God or is there not, you know? And, you know, for people listening, it's not really, not here to like land where I thought and why, but it did lead me to investigate truths about who God is, not based on what I'm taught online or in the media. Because what I learned is that anything I learned growing up, I didn't grow up in like a very churched home or anything like that. But what I started to do was actually read a Bible to start there. But what I was reading was very different than what I came to understand publicly in like a church or media.
Yeah.
And so there was this great chasm. But what really was really interesting to me was this man of Jesus, if he was God, how his genuine desire was for the least of these. And you've probably heard that term, but this idea that God actually cares most about those who we as a people care about the least. And
right?
So
there's a country song that
plenty of them.
There's a country song about God, and imagine that, right? That talks about you know, we are measured when we get to the pearly gates. You're measured by how you treated the most insignificant people in your life, right? And I use that word insignificant loosely, but the people who were least able to help you get a leg up in life, and how did you treat those? And as I hear you say it, I'm thinking like there's a lot of truth to that, right?
Yeah, well, it goes even a step further in Scripture. It talks about like that Jesus is actually like amongst those people.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's lost on like our culture that like he's talking about prostitutes, he's talking about drunks, homeless, like people that are like very downtrodden, irregardless of whether those decisions they made got them there, if that makes sense. But so yeah, I was very taken by this concept of that if there was a God and these were the people he cared about and promised that this God dwelled amongst them, I wanted to meet such people. So in kind of a smart assy way, I wanted to test if that was real. And I was living in Philadelphia, wasn't around my normal friend group. You know, hadn't really made a lot of friends yet because I was new in Philly. And so I started one weekend, I packed a backpack full of brown bag lunches and went out to find the least of these. And one of those people that ended up being very transformational in my life, I mean, my whole life pivoted off this relationship, was this homeless man named Will, who really opened my eyes to homelessness, but by virtue of his being formerly incarcerated and all the hurdles that were set in front of him. And, you know, I talk about this in like my TED Talks, not to regurgitate things, but like, I was really, again, I probably always have had this like smart assy nature, like snarky, like devil's advocate. But I was like, in my mind thinking like, it's great that you're trying to write your life, but there's just no way that you're going to ever like have a career like I have based on just what I know about our world. And
right.
That's really, but then the more that I became friends with him and like truly loved him, it started to upset me. It was an injustice that he wasn't available for that.
That the chips were stacked against him, and no matter what he did. Like
correct. It was an injustice to me, still remains to be, obviously.
Yeah.
And that was really the first seed of, you know, and again, it's neither here nor there, but for me, it was like a really interwoven in my faith journey that like, I then was recognizing a change in my spirit that like, you know, these aren't things that I ever normally cared about. And I found I had this wrestling of like, I'm spending 10 to 12 hours a day in an office, but I'm obsessing over what I could do for, you know, Will just became one of many friends that I met that were living on the street. And so Like, it didn't make me any better of a person. Like, I'm like nicer. I'm still have all the same problems as anyone else, but I was just very convicted is the only word of like, I can do something. And I had this vision for Neighborhood that really bred out of my experience in the film industry. Is when I graduated college, I never made a resume. I never filled out an application. I just kept getting recommended for work, to the point then that Sam Mercer, world-class producer, hired me on the spot without a resume, just based off my interview and recommendations, and I changed my whole life there career-wise. But my thought, or the seed of it, was, well, if someone like Will never had to fill out an application and no one ever knew he was formerly incarcerated, and he was just very good at his job, and I recommended him, it could transform his entire life. Because what was stopping him from growing as a human were things our society put in place to make sure that he never grew. And so how many of those things could I, by my power, remove? Again, I'm 25 or whatever at this point, had no idea what I was getting into, but it was like this insatiable weight, like a physical weight on my chest that I couldn't deny. I kept trying to be like, I'm not going to do anything with this dream. I'm just going to,
It's interesting that you call it a weight, right? Because, it certainly was. It was a calling and a purpose. The flip side to that is, and I think you're approaching 40 now, right? I think, right? If I did the math.
Yeah, I'm 37.
There you go. Oh, sorry. Didn't even put you that far over the hill.
Close to it's closer to 40 than 30. That's for sure.
Right. But you say this weight, right? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's almost as if, and maybe in hindsight, what a blessing it was to have something that drove you so passionately and burned inside of you, where so many people get, they get to 60, 70 years old in life, and they're like, I never found, or I never went after that thing. I had something that was, I never really found what was really just like burning inside me. And I think it's kind of cool that you use the word a weight, but yet it was also, it was transformational in your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it was, when I say it was a weight, it wasn't like a mental, like, man, I can't stop thinking about it. It was like a physical presence in my chest. It's the further I denied doing this, it's like the heavier it became. And I tried every excuse in the book not to, because in my mind, the decision was I had to quit my job with Sam to start my own company built around the idea of hiring people who were formerly incarcerated, which didn't exist. And on top of that, most of the people in my life were like, well, why don't you just wait till you're a successful producer with tons of money and then do that? But I knew I would never do it. I knew that the lure of wealth and power would guide me well away from this mission, which I didn't understand even how hard it would be, but I knew instinctually that I was denying this for my own ambition. And it was crazy. I mean, it sounds like really, it's hard because, we're like, this spring will be 10 years my company has existed.
Yeah.
But at the time I was quitting a very successful job to go move into a homeless shelter to start a business. I literally Googled how to start a business once I had already quit my job, and at that point, I actually didn't know how to make videos. Like, I only knew people that did because I was, learning to be a producer. So I knew how to put all the pieces together, but I didn't even actually practically know how to bake the bread. So the dream itself was in parts all over the garage, like,
which is funny. I saw, it was either on your TED Talk or something else that you mentioned, that film producing is nothing more. And I don't mean to denigrate the complexity of it, but it's nothing more than project management, right? Just, as you said, getting all the pieces into place, knowing what the puzzle pieces are and putting them in so it actually creates the picture, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of people that I believe could be very good at producing because it's just fast-paced business, and you have to be highly communicative, and you have to know what hurdles you're clearing, and obviously understanding the logistics is helpful, but it's teachable. I mean, my business partner Dan had absolutely no film experience ever, and with any small business. In order for him, he came on to really reinforce the apprenticeship training side once we started it, because I realized very early on I was a terrible teacher. But he essentially had to learn to become a producer, and now is a producer without any film school knowledge, just like in the trenches. This is how it works.
So
he figured it out.
So you've mentioned a couple times, and I don't think we really, for folks listening in, I don't think we really clarify what it is. So Neighborhood Film Company, it's been around about 10 years, started here in Philly as a production studio. Is that the right word? Or film company?
Production company. Yeah.
But with the sole mission, I don't want to put words in your mouth that aren't accurate, but with the mission, obviously, of being a profitable business, making films, but with its parallel mission of providing employment opportunities for the formerly incarcerated. Did I get that right?
Yeah. I mean, it is the most central part of our DNA. It's why our company exists. And we essentially bring on, it's one individual that we recruit. We work with Philadelphia judges with a reentry team, phasing of interview, application, and then we hire one individual. It's fully paid, full-time. They're working on all our jobs, and they are integrated as if a new hire at a company and expected to excel. And so it is in no way like charitable. It is, from day one, they're understood that they're an employee. They're now in a place of privilege by making, they make $40,000 a year as their starting salary. And so and then we also, put them in, there's counseling as part of the apprenticeship, all kinds of other support systems that they may not have in place. We're moving soon into the future about providing housing, because that's a massive hurdle for someone who's returning home, doesn't have a safe place to call their own. So we're really in the business of removing any obstacle that is in someone's way that can stop them from thriving. Because we've recognized that there are certain individuals that, with those obstacles removed, can and will thrive. And recognizing that in my life, I had many people remove those obstacles to the point where I didn't even know those obstacles could exist.
Right.
That is pretty much the definition of privilege, right? It's like, I didn't know I could have problems, you know?
Yeah. Why isn't everyone else doing it this way? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, this is easy. Why doesn't everyone go to college?
Yeah.
Doesn't everyone have parents to pay for it? So yeah.
You've been doing this almost 10 years and you do 1-year apprenticeships, right?
Yes.
Roughly. So are you roughly in your 9th, 10th person that you've brought through? Is that right?
We've actually had 11.
Oh, right.
The math is wonky because in the beginning we started with 3. Sure. Then there was 1 year that we took a year off. As we transitioned, we opened an LA office.
Right.
So there was this like huge gap of time where like our teams were split, and we decided as a team to not bring someone on as we like transitioned the company. So I don't know how the math works out, but there's been 11.
With 11 guys, and for folks, and I think this is why I was so fascinated. I work for a company, and our focus is veteran support organizations. I mean, that's what we try and do, is help veterans get a leg up in their transitions, or help them get connected with resources that the VA might not provide. And speaking candidly, they're kind of a safe bet. Like they've come out of the military. They, by and large, they have skill set. For people listening, I think this is why it's such a fascinating story to me. For a guy, a white kid who grew up in the suburbs, who has had little exposure to the incarcerated or the formerly incarcerated, I'm like, oh man, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of negativity, or there's a lot of risk that comes with that. And that's probably comes from a place of ignorance and privilege and everything else. So help me, and maybe everybody else. Maybe I'm speak for myself, not everyone else. Listen. Set the record straight. Like, what have you learned about the formerly incarcerated? And I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I really want to dissect a little bit of that. What have you learned, and where does society get it wrong about who they are coming out of prison?
Well, I think the overall problem that we face as a society is that anyone who's formerly incarcerated, we blanket them with the idea that they're dangerous or something to fear, or someone to fear. Yeah. We were, Dan and I were just a part of this panel with this law firm, and there was this doctor that put it so beautifully, and in paraphrasing it, she's a professor at Drexel, I believe, Dr. Taylor, and said, our society and we'll just maybe speak to America.
Yeah.
The way we view justice is if you've been harmed, justice to us is to whoever did the harming to us is to harm them more. We view that as justice.
Yeah.
And it's so wrong. Like, our goals are so twisted. Like, in my opinion, which I share with many, is that our criminal justice system is not set up to help people heal. It is set up to denigrate and destroy. And I think the people that come out of prison saying it saved them are, it's in spite of the system, not because of it.
Yeah.
So it's like I always say, I don't punish my children, I discipline them. And there's a difference. Punishment is you aim to hurt them. Discipline is, I'm a stern discipliner with my children, but I'm doing it because I love them and I want them to be stronger. So like our apprentices, like, it's a very hard environment to work in, but it's like any good boxing coach. You don't want someone that just like pats you on the back, says, good job out there. No, you want to make them fierce and you want to win. And so our apprentices are a part of a culture that's full of discipline, but it's all in the idea of like seeing them become whole, more whole and more beautiful than they already are. But even just affirming that you are someone to be adored, regardless of how your whole life has been set up to tell you otherwise. And that is what, to me, it's an unfair shake for those who are formerly incarcerated. Like Marvin, one of our former apprentices, puts it great. He's like, the worst part of prison is not prison, it's after prison. He's like, I thought I had done my time and I realized the rest of my life I'm still serving time. I'm not actually free. And
That's
so
powerful, right?
Yeah, it bothers me greatly, obviously. Especially, I think the biggest distinguisher for me, or where it started and where I would hope for it to start for other people, is like, I honestly, like, I mean, maybe like not fell in love, but like this friend of mine, like I loved him as a person and a brother. And it angered me that he was being sold lies and withheld and being compromised against, he had already done his time. Yet here he was stuck. And yes, he made those choices when he was 16, but I made some terrible choices too.
Yeah,
but I
right.
lived in a very different environment. I was arrested when I was in high school, but it didn't ruin the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so I just think, yes, I'm sure someone hearing this, the people that devil's advocate are like, yes, there are some people who are dangerous.
Yeah.
But we have to ask ourselves, is our goal to make them more dangerous? Because that's what prison does. So do you want to take dangerous people and make them more dangerous? Because right now we don't have pathways to make people better.
So what's and this is a 9-hour conversation, but what's in short terms, what's missing in prison rehab that you guys, and I think you probably addressed it a little bit, but what's missing in prison rehab that you guys have helped to fill? What are the gaps that you have helped to fill? Is it skill building? Is it like empathy? What is it that you come out of prison that you go, man, if I had one day in charge of the federal prison system or whatever, the state prison system, this would be my number one goal, putting this in place. Is there something that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with environment. Like someone going to prison, if I'm a betting man, and it's a good bet, is not coming from a safe, whole place, both environment-wise, decision-making-wise, mindset-wise, heart-wise. People don't go to prison because they're like on the up and up. You know what I mean? Like they're making either active decisions that are hurtful, or they were just born in an environment where those decisions were the most readily available for their survival. So then putting them in an environment that's even more toxic than that, it just doesn't make sense. Like, what do you actually expect as a society to happen? But we as a society just want them gone. Put them behind bars, put them behind walls. But those people, they come home. And we have not set them up for any level of success. And so the first thing I do is completely revamp the environment that they're going into. Like, it is actually one of my biggest dreams is to one day own a prison, but that's set up more like an Ivy League school, so that it's actually a more healthy environment than they're coming from on the streets. And I think it will garner more radical results in a positive direction. If they're actually, one of the things we do, even when we're interviewing apprentices, is just acknowledging that the fact that you're getting interviewed for this apprenticeship already shows us that you've made such positive decisions, like affirming, like, you are valuable. Because most of the interviews they go on, they're going to be told they're not valuable. They're going to be told like, oh, sorry, we have a policy here. We can't hire you.
Yeah. Either overtly or by way of the policy that you put in place, right?
Yeah. And it's just such an unnecessary, so that's a long answer, but the first thing is I would just change. I'd basically wipe clean everything. Like I told you privately, but like my brother's in jail. Yeah. So yes, I look like a white kid from the suburbs who grew up with all kinds of privilege, but I didn't grow up with tons of money, and I grew up in a very chaotic environment. So don't judge a book too quick by its cover. And I've been in a lot of prisons, both with my work and through my family. And I've never been in one where I'm like, damn, this is pretty nice.
Yeah.
I wonder if they got any vacancies. Like, no, they're disgusting.
My Ivy League idea has already come to fruition here.
Yeah, my God, I'm moving in. Apply for a job. No, they're trashy. The people that work there don't give a shit. It's like, it's awful. Yeah. It's not, and if there are those people listening that's like, oh, I'm a CO and I'm really nice, then you're one of the few. It shouldn't be, it should be the norm in my opinion, for what it's worth.
Right. But to your point, wiping the slate clean, because it's not just the corrections officers, the COs, and the prisoners, but it's just the overall toxicity of the environment that you would have to start fresh in order to pave new ground, right?
Yeah, and I know that that's an unrealistic. You can't just wipe it all clean, but we're getting to the point where it's becoming such a bipartisan issue just because of how expensive it is to maintain this type of atrocity.
Yeah.
Like
crazier ideas have come, right?
Yeah.
At one point, some guy said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to build a private company that's also going to fly to into outer space." And people are like, "No, that's NASA's job." And then one guy was like, "No, watch me." Yeah. So crazier ideas have come to fruition, right?
Yeah. Right now, the only thing stopping me from this is money.
Investors, the investors listening out here, we're looking for an Ivy League prison system. Crazy.
Private prisons make a lot of money. That's how I first learned about them. The corruption behind them. It's big business.
It is, right? Shifting gears just a little bit. I read somewhere that you said part of what you're looking for. So again, I think for people listening, myself included, again, I'm not ashamed to say, like, I go, wow, it gives me a little bit of anxiety thinking about bringing prisoners out. Is there a particular population you draw from? And what's your experience? If you got locked up for manslaughter versus murder one versus a DUI, all of these things they indicate a different world that you might be coming from, and different challenges that you would bring if I brought you to my company. I read somewhere that you said the two things you look for are humility and gratitude. Do you also, and you don't have to answer it if it's too sensitive, but do you also have to look at their record and what they're in for, or is that sort of like, hey, everybody gets a clean slate and it's what you're made of?
Yes, I do feel that I lean more heavily towards everyone should be given another chance if they've done their time and have those humility and gratitude and all those things. But we are well aware of all the offenses everyone sitting in front of us for an interview has. It's part of actually our ability to help advocate for them is to not be afraid to talk about why you went to jail and extinguish the fear for people, but the population that we work with primarily is by virtue of these judges in Philadelphia that run this reentry court, and it's for nonviolent drug offenses. But, we've had apprentices that were locked up for armed robbery, and that makes you go, oh, shit, that's scary.
Yeah.
But you also have to take the time. We have a lot of processes in place to, recommended from judges. They're what they've been doing since they've been out. Very extensive application process that if they can even fill that out to begin with, puts them, most people don't even want to do that. It's equivalent to a college application. And then there's a rounds of interviews. And what, you come to find is there are individuals who are genuinely repentant of their behavior. And
Sure.
I want to live in a world where I can be forgiven. And unfortunately, like I was going back to, we don't generally, I mean, even now, it's like better just to not exist on social media, because by God, if you make one mistake, people want to destroy your whole life for it.
Right.
And it's tiring. It's a tiring world to live in. And it's the world that people who are formerly incarcerated live in every day.
You made a
mistake.
That's a profound statement that I think, I think other people listening to this go, oh man, I don't know, and you hear that like, I don't know, a zebra doesn't change his stripes, right? He was convicted of armed robbery. And you're like, but he was 18 when he robbed the bank, and he's 38, and he's been a model citizen, and he's come full circle in the same we all have. I think when you put it that way, a lot of people are exhausted with like the fact that, I don't know, my 18-year-old kid put something on social media when he was 15 that he thought was funny, and he thought it was funny or whatever because he was 15, and it turns out it was politically insensitive and it was a stupid thing to do. And if our generation had that, we would all be in the same boat. And I think that's right. I think that highlights an interesting thing that allows people. I don't know. I'm just waxing philosophic, but if people say, I don't know, Ricky, man, like if you get locked up, you do the crime, you do your time, and you shouldn't have been robbing banks or something. I think you're in today's world, because other people have the ability to maybe empathize with that a little bit. Like, how about you? The last time you said something on social media and it came back, Kevin Hart put something on Twitter 10 years earlier, and 10 years later, he's taken off of the Grammys because of something he said 10 years ago. If there's one thing we're lacking, it's forgiveness. And why can't that apply to not only people who are seeking forgiveness from the formerly incarcerated, but who have paid their penance? And I think that's an interesting way to phrase it, that I would hope people could have some, maybe an aha moment, like, yeah, you're right. Actually, I am a little bit tired of the unforgiving world that we live in.
I think what people don't recognize is it's also tiring for the people punishing people.
Yeah.
It's tiring on your spirit, man. It's exhausting to be angry all the time. Like, if we don't turn our culture into one that wants to heal, like, we're all suffering under the weight of it. Like, no one wins. Yes, it's terrible if someone says something inappropriate or does something inappropriate and they get caught for it, but it's exhausting to be the one swinging the bat too.
Yeah.
So yeah, but keep it on with those who are formerly incarcerated. It's like, there are some really special individuals that we're missing out on having in our society, with great stories to tell and great lives to live, and they don't need to be punished anymore. It's like not benefiting anyone,
So that's a good segue. What you've done 11 former inmates that have come through, and you've put them through the grind, and they've come out the other side. What are some success stories, or just stories that you can share about, what I just think the work that Neighborhood Film Company is doing to take on this mission that, as you said, is a mission that needs to be done because we've already, we as a society have already pushed them to the side and given them a life sentence, no matter what their sentence was. We've given them a life sentence, and you've given them an opportunity to maybe just level the playing field a little bit. So can you share any kind of success stories, or just things that, even if it's not success by societal standards, just things you go, man, that was awesome to see him come from, or her come from this to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's the success stories are abundant. It's amazing. Trying to think of, one. I'm trying to think of what's it going. Okay, so we have an apprentice. This is a good example actually of, something people should understand listening is we're actually not. There are apprentices that have gone into the film industry, but by and large, we're teaching business practice for whatever field they want to go into. So this gentleman I was just referring to, Marvin, he was several years ago, from the jump, had no real interest in film production. He wanted to do commercial real estate. And so that's fine. We actually oddly prefer people that don't want to do film because it can tend to be in our industry, like you get to meet famous people and you're like around all this, and they can get a little like, it gets a little weird. But someone who just like doesn't care, generally it does fares a little better. Like Marvin came in very strategically saying like, I want to do this with my life. These guys are at least preaching that it can happen. I'm going to invest. And he did a great job on our productions. He actually came to Iceland with me on a shoot. Had a pretty like profound apprenticeship. But anyway, like the back half of his apprenticeship, we just sent him on a ton of general meetings with anyone and anyone who would meet with him, but most specifically in the commercial real estate space. And he eventually got a meeting with the head of the Philadelphia Housing Authority. His name is escaping me, CEO. But as they essentially they were really taken by him and made an exception, even though he's formerly incarcerated, and hired him as a property manager. And he worked there for 2 years, and now he's working with Connor Barwin's organization doing development. Just got his real estate license that we helped him get, even though he's formerly incarcerated. And with his apprenticeship, we helped him pay off a lot of debt type things. We paid for all his classes to get his licensing, basically anything and everything, paid for travel to go meet people in New York. So anything where it's like, well, I can't do that because I can't afford it, got rid of that. And he's thriving. He just had a little baby boy. He just bought a duplex, a rental income property. I mean, he's crushing it. And he'll tell you, these are all gifts that he's able to give to the next generations of his family that otherwise, when we met him, he literally couldn't get a job. It's crazy.
I think when we first started the conversation, you said, and I'm using my words, to give them a leg up that they otherwise wouldn't have, because society's already said, the chips are stacked against you no matter what you do, no matter how good you are. And I think what jumps out at me when I said success stories, one of the things that jumped out of there, you said the Philadelphia Housing Authority made an exception. And then you said he got his real estate license, which was an exception. To me, that, and again, I'm sure there's so much, it's such a deeper story with what he's been able to experience. But when you say somebody made an exception for somebody, and knowing full well that he never would have had that exception, he never would have had that pass. To me, that's one of the cool parts of why I think I was fascinated by the story, knowing that behind the curtain there was stuff like that going on. Like, hey, because of the path that we set him on, somebody else saw the potential in this guy and made an exception. And then because he got that opportunity, somebody else made an exception. And it really is it's an upward cycle as opposed to that downward cycle that most of them find themselves in.
Everything compounds, right? It's why that you have the saying, the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. You can reverse that cycle, but it takes a lot of people. Like you said, now he's got momentum in a new direction. And it's interesting how his past all of a sudden becomes this like really beautiful story that everyone's like really endeared by, and you get chills and, makes you get like a little misty eyed when he talks. And I'm like, why can't that just be like everyone's story coming home? Like, imagine if they came home to a society that was like eager to embrace them, eager to find them out, eager to be a part of that story. That's my encouragement to people, that I'm like, take the time to get to know someone who's formerly incarcerated. And I think you'll find that a majority of them are the Marvins of the world, these really beautiful, wonderful people that made mistakes that were gravely punished. And some of them are really bad things, like I'm not trying to, say that dealing drugs is like not that big of a deal. It's a huge deal. It's awful. And he's well aware of it too, but again, trying to build a mindset in our culture that's more grace filled versus punishment filled.
You said get to know somebody who's formerly incarcerated, and we have to touch on this because I think probably the 37-year-old you would look back at the 24-year-old you and be like, hey man, maybe there might have been a different way to do this. But I love it. I love that you're sort of your MO. So it seems is that you have a vision and you just go for it. And correct me if I'm wrong. What I read was that when you had this idea and you were introduced to Project Home, you actually went and lived in this homeless shelter for 8 or 9 months with the formerly incarcerated. Is that right?
Yeah, it was, I had a chance before I started the company to meet with Sister Mary Scullion, who runs Project Home.
Yeah.
And again, meeting her was as simple as I sent her an email, and she agreed to have me over to, for dinner. It's like, everyone, because I thought you were going to ask, a lot of people ask, like, how do I meet someone who's formerly incarcerated? I was like, you can call your local prison and say, I used to go into a prison weekly with my now wife and a group of friends, and we used to teach. And I met a ton of people who were formerly incarcerated. And I have friends that are still friends with those people once they got out, And there's tons of ways in it, because I know all the questions are coming. Well, is that safe for a woman? Is that safe for this? I was like, you can set up all kinds of proper boundaries.
Yeah.
And make those relationships safer, but you'll be surprised that a lot of them are just like people that wish they hadn't done what they did, recognize the error of the ways they did it, and just want someone to like believe in them, that they're valuable. So
that's
but yeah, anyway,
profound, right? Isn't that's what we all want, right? It's just to feel valued, to feel like somebody believes us, right? And it's interesting you say that, because that's such a simple human desire. It's profound, but it's something that I, as a white kid growing up in middle America, I had the fortune to have. And for other people listening, I wonder if you have an opportunity to have that epiphany and go, how much different would my life have been if I didn't feel valued, even as a kid or today, and I didn't have anybody who actually believed in me, and how much different would my life have turned out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful, powerful thing to have someone believe in you. Like, I mean, Sister Mary Scullion was really one of the first to not think I was crazy, like to want to quit my job and do this. And her and that was really her only role. Like, she believed in me, affirmed that like what I was feeling in my heart, that like, again, she's a nun, but she's like, God is speaking to you. And I've had that same experience. As I'm a 50-year-old woman, and I was 25 too. And look where I am. And like, you can come live with us, and I'll get behind you. But that was really it. And then I had to do all the rest. But that one encounter, that one dinner, and that one person just saying, you're not crazy, you can do this, gave me a lot of like, I can still remember the night sitting in her, she lived in one of her homes too. And we actually drank a Coors Light together.
Yes. What interview wouldn't be complete without talking about drinking a beer with a nun?
Yeah, exactly.
So you went and lived, just to be clear, you went and lived, she ran I'm going to use my term, halfway house, but it was a home for the formerly incarcerated, right?
Not just the formerly incarcerated. Certainly they were there. People who were homeless. In Center City, Philadelphia, one of the spots that had an availability. It was like kind of like I had a little dorm room and then like a shared living space with other people living there. So yeah.
And you were there for 8 or 9 months, just immersing yourself in that culture.
Yeah, that was really part of her mentorship, and that was, you should really come to know and understand the people you want to serve so that you can more deliberately like help them. And it was a very, certainly a beautiful time in my life, but it was a lot of anxiety, a lot of what am I doing? I am crazy. I have lost my mind. I don't know what I'm doing. This is so stupid. And then also matched with like some of the most rewarding relationships I could have ever dreamed, and just really learning also some of the ills of the nonprofit sector and things that are set up, in my opinion, to just keep social workers employed versus actually doing good. And so it was illuminating in a lot of ways.
Fast forward in a little bit. Concrete Cowboy, you finished production in 2020, right? It's coming out on Netflix this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it was actually you actually had some of your interns working on that film. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we, in the summer of, when did we shoot it? 2019.
Yeah.
We shot the movie. Yeah. We had our current apprentice at the time worked in the production office, and then a former apprentice, actually it's a really cool story. He was an apprentice. He graduated, was doing really great. Then he kind of fell back into some of his old behaviors, got locked up again. It was really hard for me personally because his name's Andrew, and he would be fine me sharing the story. He was really integral in me making my short film that garnered me the attention to get this feature film made. And so it was really sad for me that he was not going to be a part of the production, because without him on the short film, I would have never been able to make it. So I had been staying in touch with him, and then I asked him, I don't know why I didn't think of it before. I was like, why don't you send me the information of your attorney? And that he was locked up in Vermont, actually. So I just started talking to the attorney, and I said, listen, is there any way I could get him out? Like, he's guilty, busted him. There's just no way around it. He's doing his time. And he's like, listen, we can try. If you want to write a letter or something to the judge, you can do it. So anyway, I write this really exhaustive letter and like do all the stuff, but the judge reads it and actually lets him out because I guaranteed I could hire him.
No way.
And she said, all right, I'll take a bet on it. If he works on this, you actually hire him. So I had everything set up with our team on the movie. He got out. We booked transportation to get him home. We got a PO assigned to him. And then he started working. He worked on the movie. And then after that, he went to work on the Apple show Servant and some other movies. Hasn't stopped working since. And so the judge decided just recently in the last month to give him time served and put him on parole. So he's not going to jail. He was going to serve like a 15-year sentence.
Wow.
And so he proved like my time is better served outside. And now he's just doing his thing.
Yeah. We talk about success stories. I mean, is there anything more you're rewarding than knowing that you just gave somebody a second shot, right?
I mean, he's like a third shot. I mean,
or a third. Sorry. Yeah. Third shot.
But it's like, I know Drew really well. And I actually just personally don't think prison is going to make his life better, or he's, and acknowledging, yes, what put him there were his stupid decisions, which is what I call them. Like, you're smarter than this. But all I can do is it costs me so little to use for whatever zeitgeist term, privilege and power to go, maybe this judge will read this letter. And, he literally showed up the next day, was on the locations team and worked and was an invaluable member of that project, especially, we were filming in North Philadelphia, the community that he grew up in. And anyone that knows anything about filmmaking, being on locations, is you're dealing a lot with like the neighborhoods and the places you're filming. So having someone literally from that neighborhood who I trusted was an invaluable resource, and it was cool to even have a production who supported my vision as a director to like, hey, we're going to spend money to get someone home and do all that. I mean, we're going to hire them and we're going to find the money in the budget to hire him. I don't care, So
that's really cool, man. So, hey, I don't want to keep you too long. We're almost at an hour, but Concrete Cowboy comes out in Netflix. I can't help but say, hey, man, there was a lot of formerly incarcerated folks that contributed to it on the early part, on the later stages. I think that's cool, especially when you're a little bit about what went into making it and knowing the mission that Neighborhood Film Company put forward to make this. Where can folks find you on social media, on the interweb?
Well, pretty much my only social media is Instagram. So Neighborhood Film is our Instagram. That I need to get back on there, slacking.
That's a whole side job by itself.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of work. But yeah, I mean, we have a website, neighborhoodfilmcompany.com. I know we're on Facebook too. If fancy Facebook, it's just Neighborhood Film Company. I think we're on Twitter. I don't know. I'd stick to Instagram and Facebook. Those are strongest channels.
Yeah. Hey, somebody go for on Twitter? Yeah.
I know. I was going to ask Dan, my business partner who's here with me. No, we are on Twitter. I know that. I just, we have been slow in our engagement, but I do check the messages and stuff. I try to chat with whoever, you know.
And for folks that want to get involved with helping formerly incarcerated, are there like national organizations out there that you would advocate for, or is there some way that folks on the level can, like, if I wanted to contribute in some way, is there somewhere that I go to?
Yeah, I mean, actually, our company. So how we facilitate our apprenticeship is we have a nonprofit. It's called Working Film. So that's actually how we subsidize and try to pay for, you know, this extra salary for someone who has no training, for any of those things. Like, you know, when we travel on jobs, those clients don't typically pay to travel a production assistant. So we pay that out of the nonprofit. Any type of housing help, or like in the case of Marvin, you know, it's very expensive to get all these licenses in the thousands, pay that out of the nonprofit. So if people want to contribute, on our website, there is a way for you to give. You can, you know, be a monthly donor, a one-time donor. And all of that, you know, neighborhood takes on all the expenses that people don't like to pay for. Like, all the money goes towards the training or towards the apprentice's salary. Like, neighborhood pays all the other overhead. You know, Dan, our executive director, doesn't get paid to be the executive director. I don't get paid, whatever. It all is very streamlined towards that, because neighborhood can offset all the non-sexy costs that people don't like to donate to.
The nonprofit is Working Film, right?
Yeah.
And
on our website, there's on neighborhoodfilmcompany.com, there's an apprenticeship tab, and you can see all that on
Perfect,
there.
Man. We'll make sure we put that up, and it's neighborhoodfilmcompany.com. Look for the apprenticeship tab, and that's where you can donate. Hey, Ricky, thanks very much for spending time with us, man. Again, it's a fascinating story, and we love what you're doing, brother. We think it's awesome, and if we can help you get a little bit of exposure for not only just Neighborhood Film Company, and certainly Concrete Cowboy is going to do gangbusters, but just for the nonprofit to help a section of the population that could use a leg up, man. It's we hope we can contribute in some way, and we think what you're doing is awesome.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Greencastle Podcast. Please be sure to give us a like, a thumbs up, a share. You can find us at greencastleconsulting.com/podcast, or on all the major podcast channels and the social media channels, including our YouTube channel. Thanks very much. We'll see you on the next episode.